We will not be seeing the PowerPoint immediately. It'll be coming on in a few minutes, but please bear with us. I wanted to welcome everybody to this month's webinar, The Light and Power of Faith-Filled Advocacy. Today, we will delve into the issue of how legislative advocacy is an integral part of our lives as Catholics. My name is Paz Artaza-Regan. I'm the program manager at the Covenant. For those not familiar with Catholic Climate Covenant, our mission is to inspire and equip Catholic people and institutions to care for creation and care for the poor. We have 50 national partners that guide the U.S. Church's response to climate change by educating, giving public witness, and offering resources. Before getting started, let us pause at this moment and please join me in a brief prayer. This is the pledge of commitment to protect and heal God's creation, a prayer from the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops. We have come to renew our covenant with God and with one another in Christ, our Lord. We have come to help protect God's creation. We have come as followers of Jesus to commit ourselves anew to one another and to heal injustice and poverty. We have come to stand together against all threats to life. We have come to discover some new beauty every day in God's creation. The sunrise, the sunset, birds, flowers, and trees, rainbows in the sky, the stars, the many forms of life in the forest. We have come to listen to the music of the universe, water flowing over rocks, the wind, trees bending in the wind, raindrops puttering the roof. We will remember always that God speaks to us through the beauty of his creation, and we will try our best to answer God's call to reverence all of creation. At this point, we're going to try to share a screen so that you can start seeing part of the PowerPoint. And as that is happening, some important information. Their video is being recorded and will be sent to all who have registered. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation. You may submit your questions by writing them in the chat box that appears on the left-hand side of your screen. To write your message, you may need to scroll down to the bottom where you then do your question to the presenters. If you are having audio issues, not the PowerPoint issues that we're having, but audio issues, it might likely be to your Wi-Fi connection. You can try connecting via phone and see if that helps your audio. In this webinar, we are going to be looking at how to set up and conduct meetings with your legislative representatives, why the visits and relationships with legislators are important, how to influence your representatives after the meeting, and what asks need to be conveyed to your legislators in the near future. I am going to, at this point, welcome Jose, who I believe is on. And just so that we know, we're still having the technical problem with the PowerPoint, as you can see. It is showing up very small. Hopefully we'll be able to get that fixed. Jose is the Associate Director of Catholic Climate Covenant. Jose Aguto comes from leading us from FCNL, where he was the Legislative Secretary at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which is the Quaker lobby. He was the staff for Sustainable Energy and Environment Program. FCNL is the oldest and largest peace lobby in the country. And Jose led the call to conscience on climate disruption, which he'll describe in the webinar. Jose has also worked for the National Congress of American Indians. NCAI is the oldest and largest intertribal organization in the U.S. the interest they look over the interest of over 300 federally recognized tribal nations. He was the senior policy advisor for tribal climate, energy, and environmental issues. Jose was also senior policy advisor with the United States Environmental Protection Agency in their American Indian Environmental Office, helping Native American tribes gain the jurisdictional authority to protect the lands, waters, and natural resources. Jose has a bachelor's in international relations from Brown University and a JD from Villanova University School of Law. He's a longtime parishioner at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Alexandria, Virginia, and I can attest that he enjoys being a bike commuter and is also an avid reader of books written by or about the saints. At this point, let us get started with the webinar. I do have a message here that tells me that there is an option for you to magnify the screen so that you can see the PowerPoint fine if it's in full screen. Jose, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Paz, and thank you all for your patience with our technical difficulties. I'm blessed to be with you. So blessed to be part of the Catholic community. And I'm thankful that you're here to demonstrate your interest in faith-filled advocacy in Congress. I welcome your questions after my presentation and your interest in contacting me in the future about collaboration on this particular change strategy. As this webinar is the first step to helping inform you of one of the ways we together can realize social change. And I start first with Pope Francis, who in February of 2017 wrote a letter to North and South American activists at the Regional World Meeting of Popular Movements in Modesto, California, where he said, as Christians and all people of goodwill, it is for us to live and act at this moment. It is a grave responsibility since certain present realities, unless effectively dealt with, are capable of setting off processes of dehumanization, which would then be hard to reverse. These are signs of the times that we need to recognize in order to act. The direction taken beyond this historic turning point, the ways in which this worsening crisis get resolved, will depend on people's involvement and participation, and largely on yourselves, the popular movements. And as we know in the current political context, which we are all well aware of, we are encountering massive resistance to the programs and the people we hold dear. In my past 5 years of interfaith advocacy, I've noticed a reluctance among some to engage in this kind of activity, particularly in Congress. But we, Catholics and people of faith, have long been involved in making our society better, whether the abolition of slavery, civil rights, workers' rights, etc. And yet here today in Congress, we see a breakdown of civility and values, also within our nation. So the participation of people like you, people of faith, in the Catholic tradition is needed more than ever. And as many of you know, in September of 2015, Pope Francis issued his call to Congress with regard to climate change and other issues, in which he said, we need a conversation which includes everyone, since the environmental challenge we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect us all. In Laudato Si, I call for a courageous and responsible effort to redirect our steps and to avert the most serious effects of the environmental deterioration caused by human activity. I am convinced that we can make a difference, and I have no doubt that the United States and this Congress have an important role to play. We today need to follow Pope Francis's call to echo and advance that call which he gave to Congress in 2 years ago. Because Congress sets the national tone, which in turn can set the international tone towards climate action. As we are all facing the climate crisis, spiritually, we need the human race to have an evolution of love and compassion and servant leadership, as well as a financial and material commitment greater than the Marshall Plan, which Congress enacted after World War II. So I'm going to break this down into 3 parts. First, why is meeting with your legislators so impactful? How faith-filled advocacy is so important and demonstrably successful, number 2. And then number 3, how you can participate in these particular efforts. And I'm going to start first with Congress and what is political convention, but which we the American people have yet to have, at least in the past, failed to employ properly in order to enact social change. Starting first with an affirmation of that political convention by the Congressional Management Foundation, which in a survey of 260 congressional staff, in that survey, the staffers said that constituent visits to the Washington office and to the district or state office have some or a lot of influence on an undecided member, more than any other influence group or strategy. So the contrast to that is that letters, petitions, demonstrations, which in and of themselves are useful, are not as useful as you, a constituent, meeting face-to-face with your legislator. And this this is a demonstration. This is the graph that shows the study that I just mentioned of the importance of your in-person visits with your legislators. Anecdotal evidence comes from former Representative Barney Frank, who said in a story in This American Life, quote, "If voters have a position, the votes will kick money's rear end anytime. I've never met a politician, and I've been in legislative bodies for 40 years now, who choosing between a significant opinion in his or her district and a number of campaign contributors doesn't go with the district. I have had people tell me, and we talk honestly to each other, we don't lie to each other very often, you don't survive if you do. As chairman of a committee, I'd be lobbying for votes. And I have had members say to me, Mr. Chairman, I love you. Barney, you're right. But I can't do that politically because I'll get killed in my district. No one has ever said to me, I'm sorry, but I got a big contributor I can't offend." Another study from the Congressional Management Foundation found that legislators themselves said the number one aspect that's important to them is staying in touch with your constituents. They absolutely need feedback from constituents. I was once heard a Georgia state legislator say that that legislators are focused on re-election, and they absolutely need to hear from their constituents in order to figure out how they get re-elected. And if they don't hear about a particular position, then they won't advocate for it. And if we, the people, are not in the halls of Congress, then what happens is that the halls of Congress are filled with special interests. And this is what has happened in the past, and yet is starting to be remedied now. And many of you are seeing, for example, in the initiative Indivisible, and a lot of movement by constituents in town hall meetings, that people have awakened to the power of engagement with their legislators. But our faith-filled witness also needs to be voiced, and we need to bring the value that we add into this political space. Pardon me. Three examples actually that I have personally experienced are, and we at FCNL worked with a group of Quaker middle schoolers to meet with Representative Michael Fitzpatrick, and in their meeting convinced him to support the PREPARE Act, which was an act to address climate impacts by the federal government. Working with Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions 3 months ago, and with Reba Elliott, our interfaith delegation persuaded Representative Comstock to co-sponsor a climate resolution, which you're going to hear about in a few minutes. And recently, a Quaker advocate kept working with Representative Custer to get Representative Kaufman to both join the House Climate Solutions Caucus. It was directly because of their efforts that these developments happened. What are the kinds of advocacy approaches that are not unique, but important to people of faith? And I want to emphasize that this is one kind of advocacy. There are many ways and forms that people of faith can witness, but I want to present to you one which I think is especially important to us if we so choose to engage our legislators in a faith-filled way. Our approaches, if we so choose, emphasize humility, civility, and bridge building. The principles that we seek to bring or can bring are ones of forgiveness, redemption, reconciliation, and partnership. And finally, our advocacy positions are based on care for others. All of these approaches are countercultural to the standard approaches we're seeing from advocates in Congress. Our approach is particularly effective when we think about our care for others, because we're not about self-interest. And when people think about the traditional lobbyists, it is about self-interest or the interest of their client. We need to bring these principles to the table. We need to open up an evolution of love and caring in every person that we see, and in particular our legislators. If we don't, we're going to continue with what I would consider a revolution of continued behavior, of punitive actions, of vitriol, of pure secular power dynamics that are not going to get us to the evolution that we need in order to solve the climate crisis or to bring our country together. And so I wanted to go to the strategy that I began at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and that's going to inform the advocacy that I'm going to talk about later, as a demonstration of this approach, a successful demonstration of this approach that has happened over the past few years. And as context, as many of you who are already well informed of climate change, when the Waxman-Markey Comprehensive Climate Change Bill failed to pass or failed to advance in the Senate, there was a relative radio silence and an absolute political absence with regard to addressing climate change. When I came to FCNL in 2012, I was asked to figure out how I would advocate on climate change legislation, and I went back to my supervisors and said, there is no climate legislation to lobby on because we don't even have even our advocates, like the White House, even mentioning the phrase climate change. So on December 12th, 2012, working with leaders from the Catholic, Quaker, evangelical, and Jewish faith, by the grace of God, I was inspired to initiate the call to conscience on climate disruption. And the ask from the faith community was simply to seek bipartisan acknowledgement of the reality and science of climate change, based on the premise, which is the first step in addiction therapy, that in order to solve a problem, you must first admit you have one. And so we needed Congress on a bipartisan basis to acknowledge the science and impacts of climate change in order for us to see actual climate legislation. And it has to be bipartisan, because nothing gets passed without bipartisan support. The second aspect that we recognized, based on the first part of this webinar, is that we have to have constituents visiting with their legislators. We also recognize that it has to be a faith-based moral imperative to act, because actually talking about policy positions was going to just bring us down into the divisiveness of the actual issue that wasn't going to move us forward on the actual acknowledgement of the climate change phenomena and its scientific basis. We also asked that our delegations seek common ground with their legislator, regardless of where he or she is on the climate change spectrum. That we have to start a dialogue, a constructive dialogue, consistent with Pope Francis and Laudato Si, in order for us to actually engage our legislators. And I also want to add that now this is a strategy that is used when legislators are in office. It's not something that, obviously there are different tactics involved when we're talking about election and whether or not to choose him or her to be reelected. But once they're in office, it's important for people to engage with them, because they are making decisions on your behalf. And it's important to witness as well. Even if you get no responsiveness, it's important for us to witness and make it known, again, that climate change is something important that they need to address. So after over 18 months of helping train interfaith delegations across the country to lobby on our ask, one of our interfaith delegations persuaded Representative Chris Gibson, a Republican from New York and a Catholic, to draft a resolution to that effect. We then worked with other faiths, business interests, conservative, conservation, environmental, and military organizations to lobby on the resolution, both on the Hill and in districts, what is called an inside-outside strategy. We had, for example, lobbyists from major corporations lobbying on this, as well as former elected Republican lobbyists or members who were lobbyists lobbying on this, as well as faith-filled people from ages 11 to 90, meeting with their legislators in districts, encouraging them to get on this resolution. Representative Gibson asked that we get 10 House Republicans before he would introduce it. And so on September 15th, Representative Lobiando, a Republican from New Jersey, also a Catholic, got on, and then the resolution was introduced on September 17th, a week before Pope Francis's address to the US Congress. And the resolution, which is very soft language with regard to climate change and its human causality, was nevertheless consistent with Pope Francis's call to Congress to begin a dialogue on climate change. This resolution was the first formal positive expression on climate change from a group of elected Republicans since 2009. Again, breaking the silence on climate change that existed since that time. 3 Republican or bipartisan work groups were formed in the House and the Senate. Most importantly, the House Climate Solutions Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus. We also worked in the House to introduce modest but real bipartisan bills that specifically address climate change and spoke specifically about climate change. Now, I know that sounds really modest, but having worked the Hill for over 8 years, just having a House bill mention climate change is a huge lift. I also understand in a conversation that I had with a solar lobbyist that the resolution helped them procure 5-year extensions of the tax credits for wind and solar power. We also then created a bipartisan presence and a Republican presence on climate change. Moving into the new election, into the new Congress and new administration, these impacts have carried forth. After the election, we went back to our Republican co-sponsors and asked them what their willingness was to get this resolution reintroduced, and we were so pleased and encouraged that all of them wanted to carry it forth. And so House Resolution 424, the Gibson resolution, was reintroduced as a Stefanik resolution because Representative Chris Gibson did not seek re-election. It was introduced by 17 House Republicans. We had even more organizations across the civil society spectrum lobbying on it, and the coverage of its introduction was far vaster, hitting outlets such as the New York Times, Newsweek, Time Magazine, Reuters, the Catholic News Service, and the Atlantic Monthly. The reasons for this increased advocacy and media awareness is because of the contrast between the Trump administration's and Obama administration's positions on climate change. This resolution had, from the interfaith perspective, Catholic support, faith support from across faith traditions, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and civil society as well. Echoing much of what was said with regard to the past Congress, the positive impacts of this resolution are that it is an express counter-narrative to the Trump administration's position on climate change. It again forms a presence within the Republican Party and in Congress based on the reality and science of climate change. And importantly, it bolsters the bipartisan House Climate Solutions Caucus, which now has 36 members, split evenly between Democrats and Republicans. That's their mantra. You need one Republican for every Democrat. And the members of the Republican members of the Solutions Caucus are also, most of them are members of the House resolution. And as you may be seeing, and what will be coming soon are continued Republican and bipartisan expressions of opposition to the administration's positions with regard to withdrawal of the Paris Accord, budget cuts for the environment and climate, and the rollback of emission standards. Moving on to, and so what can you do? What are we doing? We are continuing to leverage the momentum. We, the Catholic Climate Covenant, in partnership with the Columban Center for Advocacy and Outreach, are having a lobby day next Friday, just before the People's Climate March. We have approximately 50 to 75 Catholic representatives coming from across the country to meet with their senators and their House representatives to lobby on the caucus and the resolution and protection of the climate budget. And we welcome your engagement in these efforts in your own districts. And we are more than willing to provide you lobby trainings, as we will do with the constituents, the Catholic constituents that are coming on February 28th. So our asks are to ask other House representatives to join the bipartisan House Climate Solutions Caucus. We are also asking senators to create a Senate Climate Solutions Caucus. And we are also asking legislators to support funding for environment, energy, and climate programs in the FY17 and FY18 budgets, especially those. We are placing a particular focus on those programs that impact the our poor and vulnerable neighbors. And to list a few of them, on the domestic side, that would be weatherization, low-income housing, environmental energy assistance, infrastructure funding for Alaskan Native villages, funding for tribal energy programs, and on the international side, the Green Climate Fund, and other climate finance that serves the poor and the vulnerable. So we very much welcome dialoguing with you. Please do not hesitate to call me so that we can help, if you're interested, help you lobby your representatives in your places of residence. And the approach is to re-emphasize, not only going back to slide 13 in terms of our faith-filled witness, is to be polite and respectful and grounded in your faith, to seek common ground, to tell personal stories, and not to feel like you have to be an expert on these issues. Legislators very much like when you are bringing your own personal witness to these positions. We also welcome you to invite others, your legislator, to your parish and homes, and also to continue to maintain a relationship with them and provide constructive ideas and stories and solutions. The Ignatian Spirituality Network has a lobby roadmap that we will use as a resource in order to collaborate with you. So we welcome you. We again have this framework to collaborate with you in a constructive way. And so thank you so much for listening, and very much look forward to your questions. Thank you, Oz.
Thank you, Jose. At this point, people should be, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box. We did already let folks know that, yes, the lobby day is next week, April 28th. I do have here a question, Jose. How do I know if my congressperson supports HR 195 or is a member of the House Climate Solutions Caucus? Where can we find that info?
So to answer you directly, if you type into your web browser h.res.195, a website will show up, congress.gov, which will show you the list of co-sponsors. And also, if you type into your search engine House Climate Solutions Caucus, it'll direct you to a link to the Citizens Climate Lobby, and you will see that roster. And also to note, we are going to be sending you a copy of this PowerPoint in some way, shape, or form that provides you the links to a lot of the text. So a lot of the text is in blue and underlined, and those are actually hyperlinks, so you can see verification and also the sources of the information that I've just provided.
Thanks, Jose. A question here: what kind of message to members of Congress that are already supportive, to those that are already either on the Climate Solutions Caucus and that are active on trying to get things done on climate?
Excellent question. That would be, it is vitally important that this House Climate Solutions Caucus demonstrates vitality. Legislators are on dozens of caucuses. We had encouraging, we were encouraged by the level of engagement that the last Climate Solutions Caucus engaged in last Congress. We're starting to see some efforts there. In this Congress, what they need to do is to start introducing bipartisan climate legislation. So if your legislator is already in the caucus, then provide them with ideas on what kind of legislation that they should be introducing that'll move in Congress.
Great. Somebody wants to repeat the browser address for access on HR 195 info.
Well, if you go to any search engine and type in House Resolution 195 or h.res.195, usually congress.gov is the top search result. And from that link, you will see the content, the procedures, as well as the co-sponsors of the resolution.
Great. And this also links to a question that somebody was asking about sending the slides with the graphs. And yes, we will be sending the PowerPoint itself with the graphs and the links. So you will be able to download the graphs as well as go to the sources, and all the links will be there. one question here for those folks that are not able to meet with their representative or their senators and only meet with their staff. Is that still a good idea? Is that still an okay thing to do?
That's an excellent thing to do, yes. And indeed, oftentimes legislators will delegate the meeting to their staffers. And in most offices, the legislators are relying on the staffers to give them the feedback that they're hearing from constituents. Absolutely. And in fact, oftentimes it's better to meet, in a way, it's better to meet with a staffer because they are more knowledgeable of the content and details of your ideas, which then they can process up to their legislator, their boss.
Here's an excellent question. Do you know if any of the bishops have endorsed the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus?
Yes. Actually, bishops endorsed.
Yeah,
I'll have to
that's a
check.
question.
It's an excellent question. I'll have to check about specific bishops. As I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops supports the resolution, and they also support the House Climate Solutions Caucus. There are several bishops across the United States that are supportive of climate action. But the names of the individual bishops supported, I don't know. But it is very heartening to know that the USCCB supports these efforts.
Great. At this point, I don't have any questions. So if people want to, oh, maybe one came in. Excellent question, in fact. When people go and meet with their members of Congress, what type of written materials should they be leaving behind for the staffer?
Excellent question. And also willing to unpack this for people in the future. Ideally, you should have what is called a leave behind, which is a 1 or 2 page document that first lists the ask and then provides some content to the legislator. In fact, there was a survey done that indicated that any documents beyond 5 pages are not well received by offices. And we can work with you to put together a leave behind. In fact, we're developing one for the lobby day next Friday that are going to have these asks. So, yep, there we go.
Can you elaborate a little bit about any evangelical groups that have supported the Climate Solutions Caucus or HR 195?
Excellent question. I'm going to use a little context here. When I was, and this goes to a lot of the dynamics around climate advocacy. I wanted to broaden this out a little bit. We found that many Republican offices do not resonate with many of the the messages coming from environmental groups. And we've learned that in order to get into these offices, not only is it important to be cooperative and seek common ground, but also to appeal to constituents and to sectors which also appeal to both Republicans and Democrats. So in our partnering on this effort, we had from the very beginning a partnership with the Evangelical Environmental Network. We worked in what I would call separate but parallel tracks. It was very important for the evangelicals to not be publicly associated with our effort. However, they engaged in their own track on lobbying members and getting evangelicals from across the country to lobby on the resolution. And it was an incredibly effective partnership in this regard, and continues to be.
Excellent. Some folks are here asking if it's too late to register for the lobby day next Friday. They're coming for the march, and now they want to see about coming to the lobby day.
We very much welcome your participation. It has to happen, well, in order to increase the chances that you're going to be able to meet with your legislator or one of his or her staffers, that you provide that information to us as soon as possible. Feel free to email me again. Normally, offices like to hear meeting invitations 2 to 4 weeks in advance, but I've been able to get meetings, or we've been able to get meetings a week in advance, so we can move on that quickly this week, so you can perhaps have a meeting with your legislator on next Friday. Also noting, though, that you can also talk to your legislator in district or their staff, and oftentimes it's easier to get some of those meetings.
Thanks, Jose.
Sure.
As a follow-up to that, for folks that are coming, they're asking also for information as to whether the covenant will be marching. Can they march with us? And will there be a mass before or after the march? You are welcome, Jose, to respond, and if you need some more info, I can help as well.
Actually, Paz, feel free to respond.
Okay. Yes, the covenant will be there at the march. Staff will be there, and so will be many of our supporters. We will be gathering right there at the reflecting pool near the Capitol. There will be a big interfaith banner, the faith contingent, as they're calling it. I believe that at 11 a.m. is when that kind of starts gathering, but people should be there earlier. There is a mass at St. Dominic's Catholic Church in Southwest DC at 9 a.m. On that morning. So if anybody's interested in that, you can either email Jose at Catholic Climate Covenant or email me, Paz, P-A-Z, at catholicclimatecovenant.org, and I'll send you information. And you can also be looking for an email. If you are one of our supporters and you receive our emails, there is an email going out Monday morning with information on the march, the final information as to where to meet and what's going to be happening. So look for that. Okay, any other questions? Let's see. What kind of content during a legislative visit is most impactful to present to the representatives and the staffers? Is it the personal stories, pictures, data? What is most impactful?
Excellent question. I'm gonna take that from the constituent perspective, because oftentimes, as a lobbyist, they want to hear more nitty-gritty details. I would say, as an overall matter, that you speak from the heart, that you tell your story, your own personal story, why you are convicted to act on climate change. That's number one. It's important for you to be authentic to who you are. And also noting that this is a conversation between two people. And the more authentic you are, the more that should resonate with the legislator and the staffer. That's number one. Number two, especially in the House, but in both chambers, important for you to describe local impacts. The impacts that you're seeing on the ground, the impacts that are happening in his or her district with regard to climate change. For example, as I mentioned in that 7th grade meeting that I was a part of, one of the 7th graders talked about this diner that he and his family likes to go to every Sunday, and the river flooded and washed away the porch of this restaurant, this cafe, and Representative Fitzpatrick said, "Oh my gosh, yes, I love that restaurant. That's wonderful." And "Oh my gosh, I totally hear you." And another one of the 7th graders said, "I have increased asthma. I'm having health impacts because of the soot that's coming into my area. The air quality has gotten worse over the years." So these personal stories are going to impact them more than say something from a lobbyist or more data-driven stuff, which they get from other sources.
Great. I agree. The stories are the most impactful almost all the time. There are some folks that are coming early because of ecumenical advocacy days. They're going to be lobbying on Monday, April 24th, and they're wondering if the climate change info sheet that we were talking about can be available to them prior to Monday.
Yes, we can get that to you. Yes.
Beatrice, if you're still there, send us an email at jose@catholicclimatecovenant.org or paz@catholicclimatecovenant.org, and we'll get it to you and anybody else that needs it before next week. This isn't so much a question, but do you know, Jose, if there is a information link or where they can find the Catholic Conference of Bishops position on the caucus? Is that something that is, up there on their website or somewhere that folks can ask?
I don't know of one for now. I can ask my colleagues. They do have a press statement in support of the resolution. And that's in this link here. If you go to USCCB, oh, look at that. There it is. Beautiful.
So okay, so when they get this, when we send it to them early next week, they'll be able to find it that way. That's great.
Yes.
Okay, I think that may be it for questions at the moment. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds. And while we're waiting, let me tell you that when the webinar ends, you will be seeing a survey. Just 2 questions that are very helpful to us when we plan for future surveys. So if you could please fill those in. Okay, I think we may be done, Jose. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. A very special thanks to Jose for his initial webinar with us. Jose started with us on early March. It might have been the first week in March 1st maybe. So
Ash Wednesday.
Okay, exactly. And so he has delved straight in, and we're very thankful for the expertise that he brings. So thank you to all of you who joined us today. And I'm looking forward to either seeing you or talking to you next week, or to seeing you at the next webinar in May, which will most likely be on food and agriculture issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jose, if you could hit stop recording and stop webinar.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.